Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of History. Where in our opening and welcoming community, we live our message of hope, love, justice, and joy. We extend a special welcome to visitors. This morning, we're happy that you're here and invite you to stop by our newcomer table to the service if you haven't already, so that we can get any information you like about our congregation. Happenings in the back of the order of service has announcements about many of our upcoming events and activities, including there's a brunch today. Please stay for the brunch following the service, being hosted by our promotion committee, and is a great way to get to know people as you enjoy a casual potluck style meal. And even better, your contributions to today's brunch will go to support the UUA's Disaster Fund Relief, which is currently helping people and organizations impacted by the recent hurricanes that have devastated the South. Eat good food, make friends, and support a great cause after the service today. This Thursday, all are invited to the Women's Alliance monthly potluck luncheon program. Lunch is at noon. Please bring a salad or dish to share. Program starts at 1 p.m. and this month's speaker is our own Reverend Bill, who will speak on lessons from the mud. Reverend Bill has run well over 50 mud rings and obstacle run courses, and he has had a few insights along the way. Come and hear his experience and see some pics of Reverend Bill as you've never seen him before. And please mark your calendars on Sunday, October 27th for our trunk or treat and taco party after the service. We'll pass out candy to all the little goblins and ghouls after our all ages worship service, and we'll feast on tacos too. So buy some candy and come to church hungry on the 27th. This message is from the Bell Choir. We are thrilled to play today and play with our newly refurbished bells. We had fundraisers in the spring. They are shiny, you notice. They work easily and correctly. They are beautifully in tune. Their cases are newly stirred with plush fittings to keep the bells safe during storage and movement. Thank you for all who participated in and contributed to our fundraising last year, and we look forward to sharing these glorious bell sounds with you today and in coming services.
Is there an announcement from any member, Jennifer?
If I'm not up here, where am I? We want to extend a very warm welcome to our visiting families from the Unitarian Universalist Church at Washington Crossing and the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Somerset Hills. This year, UU Princeton and Washington Crossing are partnering to offer 7th through 9th grade OWL, Our Whole Lives Sexuality Education, and youth at Somerset Hills are joining us as well, and their sessions kicked off about 10 minutes ago. So we in Washington Crossing are alternating hosting the OWL classes month to month. In October is our turn. Just a quick note to OWL parents participating in the orientation today. We'll meet in the Foz Theater on the other side of the kitchen at 12 p.m. Again, a very warm welcome to the members of our sibling congregations and to all of our OWL families. We are grateful for your trust and looking forward to a program year of growth and thoughtfulness and fun. Good morning, everyone. So in 2001, we decided as a congregation to become a welcoming congregation, which means that we went through some training, I'm sure some discussions, and I'm sure a lot of paperwork, so that UUA would certify us as a place that is informed and welcoming for LGBTQ people. We decided that we agree with the UUA that this needs to be an ongoing commitment. And so we have entered the welcoming renewal certification process, which is where this service comes from. This is the second service that we hold this year. We were doing the Pride service back in June. And there will be a lot more efforts this year to involve more LGBTQ topics in service, for us to offer more faith development about LGBTQ topics and supporting our LGBTQ community. And so that's why we have a service today about LGBTQ history, because we will be able to talk about that.
Finally, our child's living words. Our child's living words come from the founder of LGBTQ History Month. That's Rodney Wilson, as a Missouri writer and history teacher. And Rodney Wilson says, LGBTQ history gave me self-confidence as a gay person and strengthened my resolve to live as best I could an honest, open, and integrated life.
Our prayer today is called A Prayer for My Queer and Trans Sibling by Jess Reynolds. Here, in this holy place, standing on this ground that is holy because you are here. Here you are, in flesh and bone, filling up this body that belongs to you alone. Your pumping heart is a wonder because it keeps you alive. Your loving heart is a blessing because it keeps all of us alive. The spirit of love as a home in you. May we all see that love in you and let our hearts become mirrors for the compassion at your core. The spirit of justice as a home in you. May we light our wicks from one another until we are all aflame, until we burn out every prejudice we carry in these bones. Here you are, holy as you are. Blessed be.
Morning. In researching LGBTQ History Month, I found myself entirely unsurprised that it was a teacher who founded it, and especially unsurprised that Rodney Wilson was a history teacher, because I've had so many influential history teachers in my life. Some were quite dramatic, like Mr. Rowe, who taught us the fall of the Bastille by literally flinging a melon out the window. Others were a lot quieter, like Mrs. Herzog, who took 15 to 20 mouthy high school juniors through post-Civil War American history with utter aplomb. I had a few busts too, of course, people whose approaches just struck out with that same group, who I largely spent age 8 to 18 with. But the best history teachers, best teachers, in my opinion, don't succumb to the great man or great person view of history. With tweens and teens, you can't obviously get into the complexity of the New Deal or even the civil rights movement in a few weeks. But one way to start is to work with the empathy of your class. Get a few to understand what it was like on the ground then. living through those interesting times, as the Chinese proverb or curse goes. In thinking about those years in the late 90s and early 2000s, I appreciate Rodney Wilson's work starting in 1994, even more now than I did then. We felt at the time, living in Lawrence and going to public school, that we were a pretty progressive place. But homophobia and transphobia were still so commonplace, like the ocean all us tiny fish were swimming in. There was a trans woman in my parents' circle at Princeton Quaker meeting, but Jo was so notable exactly because she was one of the few brave enough in those days to live her open and honest self. I joined the high school Gay and Straight Alliance, run by our librarian, but also spent middle school the subject of gay rumors, people I hardly knew, using my unformed sexuality as a cudgel. And even my favorite history teachers were restrained in what they could teach us by the history curriculums of the time, in which queer history played nary a role. Looking back and understanding the sheer amount of LGBTQ history and potential elders that we lost to the AIDS epidemic, this omission seems even more blatant. What gives me hope, though, is knowing that just because history is suppressed doesn't mean it isn't there, and that archives are out there just waiting for rebirth in the hands of the right writer. Right now, I'm reading Fierce Desires by historian Rebecca Davis, and I learned about Thomas or Thomasine Hall, a trans or intersex person who lived all the way back in 1620s Virginia. And just a note here, I had to return it to the library yesterday because there were multiple other holds on it, so I wasn't able to finish it. LGBTQ history is around us, under us, bearing us up all the time. Tabling for UUCP at Pride this past summer, I met an alumnus of Gay People of Princeton, and he started the conversation by thanking us, which, sitting as the present day us, was a little confusing. It turned out that in the early days of UUCP, then UCP, as I learned, the congregation had rented space to this nascent gay advocacy group to have their meetings. He even met his husband there. And as he put it, and this stuck with me, the only churches back then who didn't give us any doublespeak were the Quakers and the Unitarians. The members of UCP and Gay People of Princeton didn't consciously set out to be historic. They set out to live their values as best as they could in the time that they had. I love reading history, and I always will, a part of me who is still that 14-year-old trying to find some order in a very chaotic world. But now I know I have a balanced responsibility, not to be paralyzed and only find history in the pages of a book. I need to also be the queer elder I could have used as an example 25 years ago, because there's definitely generations out there now and generations to come who can be comforted by knowing that we were here, we will be here, and our archives are yet to be written.
In observing LGBTQ+ History Month, we look back in reverence through those who came before us and fought for our rights. So many gave of themselves for this fight, many whose names will never be known, and others who are just finally starting to be included in the history books. This morning, I'd like to tell you about two of my favorite icons and what they have taught me. Brenda Howard, 1946 to 2005, was a cisgender, polyamorous, bisexual woman. She grew up in Syosset, New York, and graduated from the Borough of Manhattan Community College with a degree in nursing. Known as the Mother of Pride, she was an LGBTQ+ activist who organized the parades commemorating the 1-month and 1-year anniversaries of the 1969 Stonewall riots. These eventually became the Pride celebrations we know today. During the 1960s, she was also involved in the anti-war and feminist movements. During the 70s, she chaired the Gay Activist Alliance and was an active member of the Gay Liberation Front. She was actively involved in the Coalition for Lesbian and Gay Rights, successfully lobbying for LGBTQ+ rights laws in New York City. During her activist work, she was arrested several times. In 1987, Howard co-founded the New York Area Bisexual Network. She was also part of several other bisexual groups. She successfully lobbied for the inclusion of bisexuality in the 1993 March on Washington for lesbian, gay, and bi equal rights and liberation at a time when the movement was focused on gay men and lesbians. She also was involved in ACT UP protests and other demonstrations for people living with HIV and AIDS. Howard died of colon cancer in 2005. She was survived by her partner, Larry Nelson. The Brenda Howard Memorial Award was established in her name by PFLAG. The award, given annually, recognizes an individual whose work on behalf of the bisexual community and the larger LGBTQ community exemplifies the vision, principles, and community service exemplified by Howard as a role model for the community. Thanks in part to Howard's efforts, we have pride, and we have the inclusion of bisexuality in LGBTQ+ organizations. Her work has taught us, her work has taught me as a bisexual woman not to be afraid of fitting into gay and lesbian spaces, just to be proud of who I am. An even more well-known figure, Marsha P. Johnson, 1945 to 1992, was assigned male at birth, and she described herself as a gay transvestite and a drag queen, with the term transgender only coming into common use after her death. She was born and raised in a family of 7 children in Elizabeth, New Jersey. She started wearing dresses at age 5, which reflected her self-image, but stopped after being bullied by other children and sexually assaulted by a 13-year-old boy. After graduating high school, she moved to New York City and resumed wearing clothing made for women. She also adopted the name Marsha P. Johnson, in which she said the P stood for Pay It No Mind. In New York State, LGBTQ people were still persecuted and their rights were limited. Johnson had difficulty finding employment and turned to sex work, where she was often abused, sometimes arrested. She lacked a permanent home during this time and resorted to sleeping at friends' homes, as well as other establishments. She found work waiting tables and as a drag queen, where she finally felt at home. She was well known for her wild hats, flower crowns, and elaborate costume jewelry. Johnson reached a turning point when she fought police at the Stonewall riots in 1969 after they raided the bar and began arresting gay patrons. Although there are competing stories of exactly what she did, she was definitely involved in the resistance and then led a number of protests. Johnson was involved in the early days of the Gay Liberation Front and the Gay Activist Alliance, but she was discouraged by the exclusion of transgender people and people of color. She spoke out about transphobia in the early gay rights movement. In 1970, she and Sylvia Rivera founded Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, or STAR, an organization dedicated to housing young transgender individuals who were cast out by their families. During the 1970s, Johnson became a more prominent activist for gay rights. In 1980, she was invited to ride in the lead car at the Gay Pride Parade in New York City. Later in the 80s, she joined ACT UP, and in 1990 was herself diagnosed with HIV. She spoke publicly about the condition and how people should not be afraid of those with the disease. In 1992, Johnson disappeared, and several days later, her body was found in the Hudson River. Initially thought by authorities to have died by suicide, friends questioned this conclusion and suspected foul play. At the time, 1992 was the worst year on record for anti-LGBTQ violence, according to the New York Anti-Violence Project. Police reclassified her death as being from an undetermined cause, but the community was outraged that the police would not investigate further. In 2012, the case was reopened, but it remains unsolved, being listed as an open homicide investigation. In 2015, the Marsha P. Johnson Institute was established to defend and protect the rights of the transgender and gender nonconforming communities. What I learned from Johnson is to always be my authentic self. She didn't let anyone tell her how to live her life, and she stayed true to her own self-image. Too often, members of the LGBTQ plus community find themselves pushed back into the closet as they hide elements of their true selves. We should follow Marsha P. Johnson's example instead. These two LGBTQ plus icons stood up for equal rights, for themselves and for their community. May we all stand up for equal rights as members of the larger community and never forget those who have gone before.
Good morning. I first want to say thank you to all those who made the music, the beautiful music today, all those who provided reflections, and the whole Rainbow Ministry for making us more aware of LGBT History Month. And as we make LGBTQ History Month more visible, there are 2 days, or a particular day 2 days ago that is notable for LGBTQ persons, National Coming Out Day. It's a chance to reflect on the reality of coming out, excuse me. All of us have some ways that we come out in one way or another to make our identities more manifest. Sometimes done very intentionally, sometimes just a casual thing. People are often asked things like, and are you married? Do you have a committed relationship? This kind of question is even asked on a lot of forms that we fill out. And so it gets answered sometimes with very easily and without much emotional content to it. But for some folks, the step of coming out carries a lot of emotional tremor. Many people in the LGBTQ community and those who identify as queer have this experience. And most of us remember a time when we came out to someone like our parents, a sibling, an employer, a good friend. I'm going to circle back to the LGBTQ History Month because I want to acknowledge, as Emma did, the person who urging others to and essentially make this happen, Rodney Wilson. I knew Rodney Wilson as we were both delegates to the National Education Association convention at the time when he was a young teacher in a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri. And I know that just from thinking about the geographic location of where he was teaching, that there was the possibility that he might be at risk of losing his teaching position. So, however, he began to include gay and lesbian and queer people in his curriculum, and then urging others to celebrate and establish a History Month. And as a matter of fact, he did lose that position, and it was a tremendously brave act of coming out for him to do that. Coming out really is an act of bravery in many cases. And I'm working with the fact that my disability is not being able to see really well, so I'm working my best here. So it's an act of bravery, and we can really encourage all those who take the step of coming out with an identity that they want to share with others. In my work with young people in over a number of years, I was involved in coordinating the GSA forum, now often referred to as the Gender Sexuality Forum, bringing high school young people together for friendship, networking, learning, and for learning about advocacy. It was an incredible moment for many young people still today as they come together each year in the GSA forum. And one of the things that was always special during those conferences were workshops about coming out. I think they were the most popular. How do I come out was the question that so many of them wanted to think about and know about, and particularly ones who wanted to take that step with their families, with their parents, with the wider world. I often wanted to say to them, you're coming out, and this is a tremendous step that you're taking, and a daunting one often for many people. But know that as you're coming out to your parents or other folks in your family, you're inviting them to take on a new identity. The parent, perhaps, of a gay child or a transgender child. And they too need support in taking that step. And fortunately, there are groups around like PFLAG and even our own Rainbow Ministry who can support families in helping their young people come out successfully. And there are others in the LGBTQIA plus alphabet who are facing this at a much younger age. Young people who know themselves to be gender expansive, although they may not have any words to say so. Even though their birth certificate may say one thing and the way they are treated is in a particular way, they know themselves to have a truly different identity. And so we're learning, I think, how to be supportive of those people. And again, we want to be supportive of families who are raising a young transgender person or non-binary person. I heard recently from someone from another UU congregation which had a Pride ministry, and the Pride ministry was tabling, sharing information at an event, and they were bringing good sharing information and also sharing clothes for transgender people. One parent came up to these folks who were staffing the table and was offered clothing for his child who was going through transition. It's a young transgender person, and offered it to them for no cost. The man was taken aback. He was so moved by that. He wept, and they could tell how much it meant to him to be supporting his transgender child and find out that other people were offering some support too. So I don't think we ever know how much it means to an LGBTQ person, and I should make the whole alphabet LGBTQIA and plus, and however people identify themselves. We may never know how much it means to them to be supportive or to their families to be supportive. So another reflection that I had is that a person who has written books and is kind of known as a transgender woman has said, I'm not going to use the words coming out, because I realize what I'm really doing is letting in people into the knowledge of my true identity. So I hope that in any case where you're expressing an identity that you want to share with other people, that you're emboldened to let in those persons who you want to bring into your knowledge, more knowledge of yourself. And may we all do this by expressing our UU values and with loving kindness. May it be so.
And at the end of our hour, we extinguish our chalice, knowing that its light carries us until we gather again. Go forth grateful for the moments before you, the breath within you, the people among you, and the spirit guiding you toward lives of greater love, beauty, and kindness. And go forth knowing that you are held always and always with everyone else, with neighbor and stranger, by that great love of no beginning and never ending. Go in peace, and amen. Amen.